Hello and welcome. I'm Helen Atkinson, Senior Editor at Supply Chain Brain. I'm excited to be moderating this webinar today, sponsored by E2Open. The topic is Serving Up Growth at HelloFresh. With its mission of changing the way people eat, meal kit delivery company HelloFresh is delivering around 1 billion meals a year around the world. Partially fueled by global lockdowns during the pandemic, the food market is on the cusp of massive digital disruption. For HelloFresh, their technology innovation playbook relies on choosing technology partners that can help continue their market and product expansion while improving service levels and price points. And today we're going to hear about how they're working with one in particular, E2Open. After a brief introduction, we'll have a panel session, and then we're going to answer some questions from the audience in a Q&A session. Please submit questions at any time using the tab at the bottom of your screen. We will not be using people's titles or company names, so you should go ahead and ask anything you like. If you don't see your question answered during the webinar, please be assured the E2Open team will reach out to you offline. Right, let's get to our speakers. First up, we have Mike Hitmar, Product Marketing Leader at E2Open. Mike is based in Raleigh, North Carolina, and he's responsible for the industry marketing strategy of E2Open Solutions. In this role, he works with customers in the food and beverage industry to understand their needs and help deliver mission-critical end-to-end supply chain management solutions. Prior to joining E2Open in 2021, Mike led product marketing at IBM Sterling and previously held roles in product marketing, product management, and engineering at QIO, SAS, OE Connection, and General Motors. Welcome, Mike. Joining him, we have Alex Wright, who is Senior Director of Product at HelloFresh. Based in Berlin, Alex is responsible for global supply chain technology at the DAX-listed meal kit company HelloFresh, leading product strategy and delivery with teams based in Europe, North America, and Australia. Prior to joining HelloFresh in 2019, Alex spent 5 years at the UK retailer Sainsbury's, where he ran their groceries online transformation program. He has also previously held technology leadership and advisory roles at Global Media and Entertainment, Javelin Group, and Kurt Salmon Associates, where he started his career in 2000. Right, Mike, I'm going to hand over to you.
Sure, thank you, Helen. I'm very glad to be here and to sponsor this webinar and to help showcase the great work that Alex and his colleagues are doing at HelloFresh. I'd like to start off with a question to you, Alex, to help set the stage. So I have, a teenage son, and we have, he plays sports and very busy schedules, and I got this in the mail this week. So I've heard of HelloFresh, and I kind of get the concept of a meal kit, but so what do you do? How does that work? How can I get some, get some healthy food into my growing son?
Hey, that is really funny, Mike. Hello, everybody. Super excited to be here and talk a bit about some of the things we've been doing in the last couple of years and share some insights. And I will tell you, Mike, what a meal kit product is so that your son and your family can consider that. So, yeah, this kind of intro here, did the world's biggest meal kit supply chain really just triple our volumes over the last 2 years? And the incredible answer to that is yes. The growth has been phenomenal. I think the context and the backdrop is obviously been a challenging time globally, but some of the tailwinds for groceries and meal kit businesses that have been able to take advantage of that has been pretty incredible. Just very quickly, HelloFresh Group. I'm not sure whether people all understand quite how big HelloFresh is as a group. I use the term there, the world's biggest, the globe's biggest meal kit platform. That is HelloFresh Group. Our mission: we change the way people eat forever. I'll talk about meal kits in a second. And our vision, which is what we try to achieve in supply chain, is around delivering the world's leading fully integrated food solutions group. What is a meal kit? I'm hoping some of you would have had a meal kit before. It's a subscription product, actually. So very simply, you sign up on HelloFresh.com in the US or one of our international sites. You are presented with potentially 30 individual recipes for that particular week that's coming up, and you pick, right? You pick maybe 3. There's a 3 as a default. You can pick more. You can pick 3. From that, you can have a box that's for 2 people, 3 people, 4 people, to suit your family size and your kind of home situation. And then that box arrives. So a box arrives in the post. There's a lovely picture in the bottom left-hand corner here of a box that's arrived. Inside that box is all of the ingredients that you need to prepare those meals, along with a kind of a recipe card, instructions. The food is all pre-portioned, yeah. So it's exactly how much you need with very little food waste. And actually, we'll come on to this, but the supply chain in general is very short. Basically, the suppliers deliver directly into one of our HelloFresh fulfillment centers, and then that box is produced pretty much just in time and moved through our supply chain and our logistics partners to the customer. It's more than just meal kits, actually. So we have quite a range of what we call add-ons, but we're broadening those. So complementary food products, whether it's, I don't know, cheeses or garlic breads or those kind of things. So it's kind of broadening the product, but the core product itself is meal kit. Great food with your family at home. Perfect. In terms of scale, globally, HelloFresh is now in 17 different geographies. The company is 10 years old. We celebrated our 10th anniversary. I think it was in November last year, so maybe four or 5 months ago. And you can see from this slide, I guess, some of that expansion over the geography. So started in Germany. HelloFresh is a German organization founded in Berlin 10 years ago by a couple of co-founders that are still leading our business. And you can see quite quickly how we've deployed or rolled out that HelloFresh brand across the globe in the top, the top swim lane here. And actually, we have 6 other brands that operate as part of HelloFresh Group now. So again, they're in different geographies, not necessarily all in America or in Europe. You can see this. So we have Green Chef, Every Plate, Chef's Plate. A couple of interesting ones at the bottom here. Factor and New Foods are both what we would call ready-to-eat brands. So they don't deliver a core meal kit that is recipes that you cook. They will deliver a ready-to-eat meal. And that has been acquisitions over the last couple of years, phenomenally successful in both the US and Australia. And another one at the bottom here is something called Good Shop, which is actually just deployed or set up in the US last year. And that is a meat subscription box. So a really big range of product propositions globally. So, for the supply chain professionals that are watching this, I'm sure you're thinking, wow, that's quite interesting. That's one of the I think most interesting global food supply chain products that delivers direct to consumer from one group that certainly I've come across in my career. In terms of the size of the business, so this is where we sat at the end of 2021. We shipped just over 1 billion meals globally. Revenue as the group was just shy of 6 billion euros. We have 7 million active customers across the world. We joined the DAX 40 last year, at the end of last year. That is the 40 largest companies on the German stock exchange. So the company is listed in Germany and the company floated, I think it was about 3 years ago. So we are now one of the largest German companies by market capitalization. And at the time, 4 or 5 months ago, we were employing around 17,000 employees across all of our various fulfillment centers and our sites in each one of those various geographies that were on the previous slide. Profitable, it's not on this slide, but just to give some context, profit last year was around about 500 million euros, 500 million euros. So what is essentially a food direct to consumer business online that is profitable, which is again is I think quite rare when you look across the landscape that I see generally. And this is that revenue over time. And I think, did the world's biggest meal kit provider really just double their revenue in the last 2 years? Look at these last three bars on this chart. So massive growth really through 2015 to 2019 from 0.3 billion to 1.8. But where it's really interesting is those last 2 years, 1.8 billion to nearly 6 billion. And we're going to talk a bit about some of those challenges, Mike. But I think that's that's who we are. That's where we've come from. Certainly an interesting last 2 years.
Thanks so much, Alex. It's really interesting to hear about that, and that's incredibly impressive growth. So now we're going to have a panel discussion so that we can dig into all of this a little bit deeper. And so I wanted to ask you to tee this up. Alex, what's the magic behind HelloFresh? How are the meal kit components sourced and delivered, and what does your supply chain look like?
Yeah, there's so many aspects of it that I think are magic. The thing I think that is what I would say is most magic when I think about it with my supply chain hat on is our understanding of demand. So because we have a subscription business model that is essentially pushing product to customers once they are subscribed with our business, we have a really strong advantage in that I know in theory exactly how much produce I need. So if we can manage our supply chain incredibly efficiently with respect to inventory and our suppliers performing, we can actually deliver a groceries online product very efficiently with very low waste. And it's that waste piece that I think is one of the structural advantages that allows us to do this profitably. I mean, the other magic piece, I mean, there's loads, right? So the product itself, it's great food. One of our senior executives used this analogy recently. He sort of described the portfolio of recipes that we've developed globally, a bit like the Netflix of food. And yeah, okay, maybe there's a little bit of artistic license there, but I think that's it. We've got some really great recipes, and we use insight from customers. So customers give all this great feedback. We improve those recipes. So if we get it wrong, we can drop it. If we get it right, that's great. We can reuse it. We can use that globally. So we have this Netflix of recipes that is great. We have a product that I think is, when we think about sustainability, it's very strong. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about that now, but we are delivering a supply chain that has very low food waste. One of the biggest things consumers can do as a general rule of thumb is don't throw food out, right? Food waste is a massive thing with respect to carbon footprint. There's loads, right? But that is a big one. And certainly when you get into high carbon footprint produce like meat, right? So if you can reduce food waste, you end up with a highly sustainable product when you compare it to almost any other form of food shopping procurement. So we have this very strong product that is not just Netflix of food, but is also sustainable. And we believe, is very cost effective for our customers. So it's like win-win-win. But I think the real magic from a supply chain perspective is that understanding of demand, and then our ability to kind of execute.
So what you're saying is there's almost no noise in the forecasting, demand forecasting.
Yeah. Well, so there definitely is some noise. I think that the challenge is as you seek to increase the complexity of the product for your customer. So what we've seen at HelloFresh is we've grown the number of recipes that we can give a customer from, so when we start a market, there's maybe 15, 20, 25, 30. This increases the level of sophistication that we need in terms of managing inventory. And it is getting harder. It is definitely getting harder. Definitely getting harder. And that's where when our various technology partners start to come in, and our internal technology. But how do we ensure that as we make our product more compelling for customers, add more products in, increase the service level, all of those aspects of the supply chain, how do we make sure we don't lose this competitive advantage, which is really understanding inventory and keeping waste to a minimum? So it's a magic product, I would say. It's a sustainable product, it's a cost-effective product, but it's also, from a commercial perspective, a very interesting product in the way that we can manage demand and therefore work very closely with our suppliers to make that work with very low waste. it's, you know, it's fascinating. It makes it quite different from, I guess, some other food online businesses that are a pull model, right? A customer goes onto a site and chooses the products that they want. Okay, we sort of do that, but it's different. It's a subscription, it's a push. So I think that is you know, that is probably the magic. I mean, we have a global footprint, so we learn globally. So when we see something work really well in a market, let's say America, America's half our business. Huge amounts of insights and learnings from the pure volume of customer interactions with our digital product and our supply chain product. We can then take those learnings globally and leverage those. So having this global business is allowing us, I think, to certainly be successful, but in a way accelerate away potentially from some of our competitors in that sense. You know, we're really trying to leverage that data that we have about demand, about customers, about recipes, and use that to, you know, to drive the flywheel, to sort of use that sort of term. Yeah.
Right. Great. I just wanted to dig in for a minute about the food waste thing. I think it's really significant, because I know that there was some pushback initially with some of the early meal kit companies in the US, where people were a bit alarmed by how much packaging there was involved. And so there was a kind of pushback and saying, well, you know, this can't be sustainable, this can't be environmentally good, completely ignoring the enormous impact on food waste, which is actually a much larger problem. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Well, we do a lot to remove plastic from our product. So notwithstanding the fact that I believe it is a compellingly sustainable product in the first place, we continue to strive to do that. So we now, for example, all of our cool pouches that we use are paper-based. Our ice packs that we use, they are now all water-based, so they don't have any kind of.
Brilliant!
So, yeah, so there's loads of work to continue to take as much packaging out of the supply chain as possible. I think what is very interesting about our product is the waste that you see when the box arrives is largely almost all of the waste through the entire supply chain, which can be quite different in you know, compared to a traditional groceries business where to a certain extent you don't see all of the waste in the supply chain. Yeah, so it's, I mean, there's loads of studies. We do an annual sustainability report that talks a lot about what we do there and explains how we continue to drive that down. I think yeah, I mean, it's a big issue. You know, it's a big macro trend that we,
well, you know, and it's there's a lot of consumer pressure coming in, and it's obvious that you're responding to that quite well. And so I just wanted to, on that note, move on to the subject of the pandemic and the lockdowns. Those had a very profound impact on consumer demands in some obvious and some not so apparent ways. How did that demand play out at HelloFresh, and how did you respond?
I think that's probably one of the most interesting things for supply chain goes, right? So we realized quite quickly that we were going to need to materially increase our capacity. Yeah, like so as a business, we had you know, a headroom capacity maybe of 20-30% from where we were. So we started to build that in, but that disappeared quite quickly because there was a huge demand in kind of customer demand when the lockdown happened and people were at home. So what we quite quickly did was prioritize finding sites and opening you know, them and putting warehousing technology in. We also did something that I can't imagine we would have considered doing it before the pandemic. Was in some cases we simplified our menu, so we potentially reduced the number of options that a customer had. And or in some cases, we extended the lead time that a customer would have in terms of receiving their box. So to a certain extent, that priority decision, you know, was about I'm gonna try to meet demand, but I'm gonna give potentially on some of the product proposition, either in terms of the customer lead time and or the number of options that the customer had. But we felt that given the pandemic situation, customers needed a product, right? I mean, there was people,
Right.
kind of locked in. So
Yeah.
the supply chain suddenly jumped into gear around getting hardware into warehouses and opening sites and moving away priority-wise from some of our, how do we make the supply chain capable of handling more complex pieces?
Right. Yeah. So you had to adjust, you had to pivot a little bit because it was such an unprecedented.
Yeah. And the other thing that we did, which I guess is, the lead into E2Open to a certain extent, is we'd realized this pre-pandemic, but we being a global business is great, but I'll be very honest, we don't have consistent supply chain in all of our clusters. Yeah. So I think that's one of these big challenges for businesses that are global. So if I'm being very honest, we maybe have 5 or 6 different supply chains. They're very similar, but they're all quite different. And so what we realized is, probably pre-pandemic, but certainly was kind of came to the fore through the pandemic, is if we suddenly wanted to make a product proposition change, we had to do it 6 or 7 times. We had each one of our local groups had to make these changes, and notwithstanding the pandemic, that doesn't really scale effectively. If HelloFresh aspires to be bigger than it is today and aspires to handle a more complex product and do that consistently in all of our geographies, we need a more globally aligned supply chain that can scale with it. So we were starting to look at technologies that would allow us to do that and to work really well with our suppliers, and thinking about inventory, purchasing, kind of logistics into our supply chain, first mile into our supply chain. And that's where we then realized that we were doing that a little bit too locally, and we wanted a partner to help us do that and work with in any one week, maybe 2,000 suppliers that we work with globally. So E2Open, we've been working with them on our purchase order collaboration and inventory collaboration with our suppliers to provide a global mechanism. And there's loads of other parts of our supply chain where we're looking at that, not just purely, but that's definitely a big challenge for a global business. And we saw that in the pandemic. It meant that we did things 7 times. And I would love to say in the future, when we need to make a big change in our supply chain or improve our product in some way, we can do it once and deploy it globally. That's kind of like that's the goal.
That's the holy grail, right?
Yeah, that's the holy grail. Yeah.
Mike, maybe you could talk a little bit here about how E2Open helped with inventory management at HelloFresh during this time of growth.
Yeah, well, it just starts with the network, as kind of Alex alluded to, right? Being connected into the partners upstream, downstream, to collect their information, to understand their purchase orders, and understand and automate some of that process, right? So it really, Alex has talked about collaboration, right? That's two-way, kind of orchestrating efficiently, but it really starts with visibility, right? You can't collaborate if you don't see the data, right? So you got to be able to see your inventory, where it's positioned, and be able to make some decisions on where you're going to be either short or have surplus, especially in a grocery, in a food related business where you have high perishable rates, right? So efficiency of moving that goods there. So it starts with that network to collect that data, gain the visibility, and make decisions from there.
That's terrific. And I know that, that's a sort of there are lots of ongoing challenges. For example, as we're coming out of the pandemic, we've got rising costs of raw materials and rising costs of fuel, and there's inflation, and now the war in Ukraine. How is all of that impacting growth at HelloFresh, Alex?
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I think I'm not sure. It's so there's 2 scenarios. There's growth and then there's profitable growth.
Right.
Yeah. So I think what we're seeing as a lot of our markets exit, more of these hard lockdowns is growth is happening. That's good, right? I think it's because people are still spending a lot of time working from home as well. So there's this dynamic that I don't think the world's ever quite going to be the same. We're much more comfortable now with members of our teams, or even ourselves, in this hybrid model, working from home. You know, I'm sure plenty of the people watching this are at home, right? You know, and so that's actually, you know, I think a continued tailwind for HelloFresh. So I mean, there's loads of other bits, but growth is, you know, I think is okay. On the cost side, big challenge. You know, there's three big costs in you know, in our supply chain, probably the same in most supply chains. There's the cost of the ingredients itself. There's the cost of the labor that's involved in producing the product, and then there's the logistics costs of getting that box from, you know, from HelloFresh to the customer. All three of those cost lines, I think we need to really focus on automation. Certainly with things like labor, how do I make the process as well automated as possible to keep production down, and then things like optimization. So on the logistics side, where you can do that really well, you know, if you've got a very highly densely populated region, and everybody, you know, you can influence people to all have their deliveries at the same time, then of course shipping to that geography becomes more cost effective. We the HelloFresh on the logistics side, you know, just quickly, we typically in most of our markets are delivering direct with third parties, the kind of the FedExes, UPS, DPD of this world. But actually in some of our geographies, there's one in particular where it's a very highly densely populated, where we actually do 100% of our own fleet, and that's the Benelux, Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg, right? It's you know, it's a very small you know, region of Western Europe, highly densely populated, so it works. And so what we're now starting to see is this scenario where HelloFresh will have a hybrid logistics model, where maybe you know, 80% maybe, let's say, goes with the DPDs and the UPSs and the FedEx, but maybe we'll have these highly densely populated areas where we believe we can actually fulfill either more cost effectively or deliver a better product. The better product as in I can have shorter time windows on those deliveries. I can actually deliver that produce in a chilled vehicle. So I control the entire chill chain. So there's things that we can do around optimization on logistics. There's things that we can do around automation in the production. And then in the buying, you know, the procurement on the ingredients, again, that's about optimization. If I think really carefully about the way I set up my menus and my inventory and my recipes and the individual ingredients I use, if I do that really, really well, I have a lower cost, or I certainly have an opportunity to optimize. If I do that very, very badly, then I don't. And so this is, you know, this is kind of like, what do we need to do better? There's economies of scale, but there's optimization of certain processes, you know, around the way we buy and probably the way we ship. You know, and in the production, there definitely is optimization, but a large part of that, I think, is also about automation. And that's some of the, you know, some of the other interesting things that I think, you know, is happening in supply chain right now, is how do we take as much stuff inside what goes on inside those fulfillment centers and make it automated, reduce the labor that is needed, the wasted labor.
Right. But you better be careful. If you get too efficient at transportation and distribution, you're going to end up going into that business.
Yeah, well,
slippery slope.
Yeah, because I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who could use your expertise with it, and their competitors too. So you're talking about optimizing and mitigating costs, and that's great. And it's really interesting to me that it's relatively rare to meet a company that's so focused on those three areas of cost: the materials, procurement, the production, and the fulfillment, and that seems like a very good balance to me. Wanted to talk a little bit about resilience. I know it's the buzz term at the moment. And you know, it is a critical attribute for your growth, because, you know, as we've learned painfully over the last couple of years, supplies can be uncertain, and especially when you're dealing with perishables, that's a big deal. So how let me ask you, Alex, how do you define resilience, and how does technology help you achieve it?
Defining is very, you know, sort of very hard. I think there's a little bit about just really understanding your business and understanding what are the key performance indicators that are critical to your business that demonstrate resilience. And that will vary, I guess, depending on the nature of your product and the lead time and the way you move materials through a supply chain. The key one, I mean, there's lots, right? But one of the critical ones for us is about supplier performance of our ingredients into our supply chain. So you know, let's just go with on time, in full, in quality, OTIF IQ, right? If suppliers do not do that well for us, we cannot deliver our product we just don't have the ingredients. And we have a sort of a more of a just-in-time model. So I try to order based on the demand. That's how I seek to minimize waste, you know, in a lot of scenarios. And I'm heavily relying on those suppliers. And as my business scales, even more so, you know, and if they let me down, I can't just kind of do an emergency order and maybe find a nearby supplier that is potentially more expensive, but will fulfill that volume. The volume is too big. So one of the key resilience measures for us at the moment is supplier performance on time, in full, into my warehouse. And how do I do that? I need to be really well integrated with those suppliers. So they really truly understand how much I need. They understand how much I'm buying. They acknowledge that. They provide me information about when it's going to come into my facility. And we measure that, and then we hold them accountable to that performance. And I think what we're seeing is, as we scale, that's more critical. One supplier letting me down, if that project is in, 50% of my customers' boxes, meal kit boxes, it's very bad for me, right? So supplier performance is a key part of resilience, and using technology and integration with suppliers to measure that, hold them accountable to that. You know, if they do a great job, reward them for it, maybe. But I cannot allow that to be poor. The performance.
I was going to ask you about that. So you use carrot and stick then. It's not all.
I'm not sure we're that sophisticated yet, right? I mean, that's not really my decision, right? That would be the procurement team that would make. We have the opportunity to use carrot or stick if we had that, had that really well structured. But it starts with having that data. It starts with having the technology in place, working backwards from the data you need. Put the technology in place. Get the performance information that you then need to drive what is the important KPI for you. Yeah. And for us, it's a lot about supply performance, and then there's loads about actually the performance in our warehouse itself. How do we make sure that if a site needs to produce 250,000 customer orders a week, how do I make sure that I know it's done the right number that it needed to do today? But that's more with my gift. The bit that is not in my gift, but is really critical, is that supplier into my supply chain.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and if I may, Helen,
Mike, yes.
I think just Alex, if you could just help connect a couple of dots. I think that you've mentioned, in a way, you've already kind of answered this, but since we're talking about HelloFresh and how E2Open is helping you, and that idea of PO collaboration, right? So that's that bringing that data in and reconciling, and the notion of automation, because I think the notion of automation at your supply chain is particularly interesting, right? Because that can be like physical automation in the warehouses and distribution, but also, when it comes to like POs, right? How we help automate that to identify that, and your team or the team can focus on more value-added activities, right? Rather than manually reconciling POs. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I think you touched upon it a lot. I think so. When it comes to just the whole purchase ordering, advising suppliers, I think I referenced earlier, we come from a position where we sort of have localized supply chains, very similar but different, and we want to move to a scenario where we're much more globally aligned. And part of that is how do we communicate with suppliers, and that varies between the various geographies and the way that we communicate purchasing requirements to them, purchase orders, and the way that they then dialogue with us about meeting those commitments, and that is not necessarily consistent, and it needs to be, and it's not necessarily very well integrated, and we don't understand the data, and it needs to be, because we're a €6 billion business, so we're doing a lot of work to make that process more resilient. And that's kind of where a partner like E2Open is really helping us on a global level to stand out. So our goal in using technologies like E2Open is to move to more global ways of working. I think it's one of the big challenges for any global business that wants to be scalable, is how do you try to ensure that aspects of your business can scale and are resilient. And if you end up with 7 different supply chains, that's always very hard. 7 different sets of technology, 7 different ways of thinking about data. Stop. So yeah, important for us.
Right. No, that's wonderful. And actually, what I'd like to do is invite Mike in and do give us a little bit more of a big picture about how E2Open works with disruptive high growth companies like HelloFresh. Mike, perhaps you could enlighten us about that.
Yeah, and I even touched upon a little bit of this as we talked earlier, just for people that aren't familiar with E2Open, right? So we are, the largest pure cloud-based provider of supply chain planning and executions, or supply chain management capabilities, and we really start with the network at the core. So it's all about connecting the multi-enterprise, right? By nature, supply chains are multi-enterprise, right? So we're founded upon that network, bringing those entities together, not just your immediate upstream, downstream partners, but the idea of multi-enterprise, so end tier down, right, and bringing them into the fold to help bring visibility, automation, optimization, orchestration, all those things that when you roll them up together, kind of start to define, Alex's definition of resilience, right? So resilience isn't there, but it's kind of like, I think of resilience as kind of like quality, right? Because I know when I see it, but I have a hard time putting a specific spin on it. But maybe on the next slide, I can get into just real briefly a little bit about kind of our architecture, how we make that happen, like we talked about, right? So really start with a strong orientation on the end-to-end supply chain, right? It's going to look a little bit different in every industry, even more different at each individual customer that we work with, but we understand that from raw materials all the way through channel delivery to the end consumption. We enable that all through a kind of a common technology platform, this E2Net, that brings that data in, normalizes it, harmonizes it, makes it available for putting into automation, for intelligence, for improving those workflows. In Alex's case, it's around the inventory and working with partners, but we provide a host of other opportunities from in the logistics management. So maybe we can help you manage those trucks and coordinate with your partners. See, I got to do a little upselling here while I'm on with that.
Yeah.
No, it's all good, but it's not just those, as we refer to them as intelligent applications, right? We work with those other third-party providers too, right? We know we're not sole source, and we bring that all together in a unified user experience, not just same look and feel, but actually making that data, where appropriate, available across supply, demand planning, channel, etc.
Yeah.
So with that, I don't need to labor on about E2Open. Maybe turn it back to you, Helen, and if there are some questions that we can.
Great. Yes. Thank you so much, Mike and Alex. That's been really interesting. I'd like to get to some questions from the audience. And once again, please submit your questions using the tab at the bottom of your screen. We won't be using people's titles or company names, so you should feel free to ask whatever you like. And if you don't see your question answered during the webinar, please be assured the E2Open team will reach out to you offline. So yeah, we've got some interesting questions in here. So here's a good one. I think this is for Alex. On reflection, is there anything you would like to have done differently in terms of planning and prioritization, maybe as it became clear that COVID was going to last for quite some time?
Wow, okay. So good question. So is there anything we would have done differently at some point over the last couple of years? I think it would have been Not much, right? I think we did a good job to, open up our capacity and drive that. I think we really, to double that over 2 or triple the volumes and do that was amazing. If anything, it would have almost been more ruthless prioritization. I think towards the end of the last 12 months, we started to introduce some more complexity into our product, which is great. We started to roll out, some of our what we call HelloFresh Market, which is, I think I mentioned earlier, these complementary SKUs. And we started to reduce the lead time, and maybe we did that a bit too early. Maybe we sort of, there was a read that things were perhaps better, and then they retrenched. So we saw the second, third, fourth wave, and being a global organization, those all kind of happened at different times in Australia and New Zealand, in North America, and at various points in Europe. So I think it probably would have been perhaps even more prioritization to somehow even take advantage of that opportunity further. But that's maybe being greedy. That's maybe being greedy. I think we did a pretty good job. Learnings for sure. Perhaps but in general, maybe more ruthless prioritization. Yeah.
Interesting. That's a great answer. And how do you think growth in online groceries and meal kits will be impacted as the world hopefully exit the pandemic? I think you were saying earlier you think things have changed for good, at least to some degree.
Well, I think they have. Yeah, I think so. I think you've got this scenario now where they're going to be working from home. We're going to have that more hybrid scenario. I don't know whether it's 50-50, but we're not going to return, I think, to 100% in the office. I think people are, as a consequence, spending a bit more time with their family at home, cooking. I think that's good. I think that's a tailwind that works well for certainly for meal kits and maybe deliveries online, food deliveries. I think it's in groceries online for let's say a traditional, like a Sainsbury's or a Walmart. I think the dynamic is maybe that there will be a shift back from online shopping to the physical store. So I think it will play out differently for the different product propositions. So they're all subtly different. A rapid online delivery is quite different to a HelloFresh meal kit to a grocer's online delivery. So I think but what I do think is the e-commerce market in general, direct to consumer, has had this huge boost, and I don't think that's going to change either. So I think everyone is now far more comfortable shopping online, whether it's food, whether it's clothes, whether it's DIY gadgets, whatever it might be. So I think this shift from physical retail stores to online is just inevitable now, and it's had this tailwind. So I think that every business needs to think quite carefully about multi-channel and how do they do that. We don't have a physical store footprint, right? So that has other challenges for us. But yeah, it's a fascinating world, and I think it just will continue to grow from an e-commerce perspective. And this dynamic of working from home, I think is here to stay. We've all learned it. I was a not necessarily a believer 2 years ago. But now, okay, maybe. But now I have a much higher degree of confidence in in the fact that model can work, and I think so.
Yeah,
I concur that with just a quick personal anecdote. I concur completely, because I find I'm working at home right now, right? But without that commute, right, I'm not passing by the grocery store, right? So I can't stop and pick up groceries on the way home.
That's a great point.
Now going to the grocery store is a special trip. And some of my experiences doing even curbside pickup or home delivery with grocery especially fresh produce. You can't squeeze the melons, you can't pick the right head of lettuce. You're subject to somebody else, choosing the right one. The 2 green bananas, or brown bananas or whatever ends up in your doorstep. So.
Yeah, it's a shift for sure. We're running a little tight on time, so I'm going to go to a final question. And I'd like to get both of you to answer this one. If our audience members could take away one learning from today, what would that be? Alex, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
One learning, what about kind of like the pandemic, the last couple of years, the growth? Yeah. I would say something along the lines of when you have these periods of high volatility, you know, I think the last 2 years have been extremely volatile and so many different levers. It's really important that you are decisive. So you have an organizational structure that allows your commercial operation to be decisive in, you know, certainly in supply chain, but probably in all aspects that you prioritize. So there's always trade-offs, right? And you have to be really clear. So you need a team that's going to be empowered to make those trade-off decisions. And then you know, focus on the customer, right? So at the same, you've got to make sure you deliver your product well for your customer. That's your business. So, you know, decisive, ruthlessly prioritize, and then just kind of keep an eye on the customer, you know, because then you will, you know, keep your eye on that prize, and then you will steer well through these times of volatility. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Alex. Mike, what are your closing thoughts?
Yeah, I love that, Alex. I think I would add to that, you know, that as I touched on earlier, right? Supply chains are inherently multi-enterprise, and we as supply chain practitioners for a beginning of time have focused on optimizing and automating and all those great attributes, but within our four walls, right? I think it's time to recognize, you know, the true nature that these workflows don't begin and end at your receiving and shipping doors, right? They extend way beyond your enterprise. So understanding that from end to end, and that's where you'll build true resilience, where you'll be able to get the efficiencies, where you'll be able to deliver that product. And the other takeaway I get from this webinar is I need to get online and order some meal kits.
Yeah, I think I do too. I'm getting
That's a good one. Love it. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah.
Well, that's wonderful. I'm afraid that's all we have time for today. Thank you so much to Mike from E2Open and Alex from HelloFresh. And in a special thanks to everyone for participating. I think we've learned a lot about working with the right technology partner and how that can help a market disruptor grow and thrive. We had a lot of questions today, and we'll be answering the ones we didn't get to with you offline. You're also going to get an email later with a link to view the webinar on demand, so you can share it with people if you want, and as well as contact information for E2Open. You can also download a white paper from E2Open at the address you see on your screen now. Thanks to everyone for their participation. Stay safe, stay happy, and enjoy the rest of your day.